Coming up on Secrets of World War II, in London, the haunted bunker that saved the world, the innocent French village that died a bloody death, and hidden in the English countryside, the forgotten first act of the curse of the Kennedys.
To have a link with the Kennedy family in my hands, I feel an honor, but also slightly spooky.
Between 1939 and 1945, the world was torn apart by the greatest war mankind has ever known. Today, amazing relics of the conflict survive to remind visitors of the suffering, the sacrifice, and the evil of World War II. Omaha Beach in Normandy, the legendary scene of the bloodiest battle of World War II, immortalized by the Steven Spielberg film Saving Private Ryan. On June 6, 1944, thousands of American troops were mown down as they struggled up the beach. Failures of intelligence meant that there were 3 times as many German defenders as had been expected, and Americans walked into a bloodbath. 60 years on, more than 500,000 American tourists visit the Normandy beaches every year. Dr. Harry Bennett from the University of Plymouth in Great Britain has brought some here today to help uncover D-Day secrets.
It's down to, as it were, individual American courage. It's down to guys who've seen, a lot of their friends shot down, who've seen a plan begin to fall apart, who in effect say, okay, the buck stops with me. I'm here, I've got to take a decision, and the decision is, this is what we've got to do. We've got to get up there, we've got to get amongst the Germans.
On Omaha Beach, everything that could go wrong did go wrong. Even America's supposedly floatable tanks never made it ashore.
These things could operate on both water and land. There was only one problem at Omaha: the majority sank.
Today, adventurous divers can visit these tanks, a hidden cemetery lying 100 yards off the beach. Be warned, the seas here are treacherous, and only the most experienced should explore the rusting hulks. The western tip of Omaha Beach was the scene of the most extraordinary battle of the day, a fight on a sheer cliff face called the Pointe du Hoc. On top of the cliff, Allied intelligence had identified what they thought was a huge gun pointing out to sea, a gun that had to be taken out if D-Day was to be successful. American Rangers scaled the cliffs using ladders borrowed from the London Fire Brigade as the Germans attacked them from the heavily defended position above. Visitors can explore the ruins left behind after the amazing battle here and discover the story of the Rangers' bravery and their terrible realization that the defenses at the Pointe du Hoc were not exactly what they seemed.
In other words, it's a hell of a job to get to the top of this cliff. It's a hell of a job then to have to clear this pocket out. When they arrived at the top of the cliff and began to, as it were, drive the Germans out, they found something to their absolute horror. That the gun positions which they thought were here were in fact full of nothing but telegraph poles. The Germans had in effect played a dirty trick on the Allies. In other words, from the air, those telegraph poles jutting out of the gun positions looked exactly like heavy German weapons.
The Pointe du Hoc was taken, but only 50 able-bodied Rangers were left at the end of the battle.
To look straight up and see a German throwing a bomb down at you, and you're holding on by the tips of your fingers and the tips of your toes, and there's nowhere to run. There's not a bush to hide behind.
I can't imagine what that would be like to try and do that. I'd be so scared.
You can read about this place, you can read about Omaha Beach, but it's not until you're actually stood here and you can smell it and you can feel it. You can taste the salt on the wind. You can see those cliffs, that you really understand what those guys went through.
And some of those young men lie just a short distance from the beach where they fell, at the American cemetery at Colville-sur-Mer. More than 9,000 American citizens are buried here, all of them killed on D-Day or in the days shortly after.
9,000 different stories.
Yeah, 9,000 different stories, and this is where they end up. And You just kind of hope the world that we see today is a world that, you know, they thought it was worth giving their lives for.
At Colleville-sur-Mer, crosses mark the graves of Christians and stars of David mark the graves of Jews.
There's an old phrase that, you know, in death there are no division. That here you have, you know, Jew alongside Gentile, Christian alongside Jew, and there is a kind of an equality here.
I just imagining what those men went through. I can't. I really can't. I mean, you can look at someone's pictures and you can read about it in books, but you need your own personal experience, and you need to feel this. I mean, they came to France and sacrificed their lives and just trying to save their country and help other people. I mean, and just in retrospect, it doesn't seem right. Like, I feel very selfish. I feel selfish that I don't have to do that. And that I don't have to leave my family, and that I don't have to.
The cemetery is American territory, a gift from the French, in gratitude for the sacrifice U.S. citizens made liberating their country from the Nazis. After saying goodbye to his students, Harry has come 12 miles inland to Sainte-Mère-Église. He has come to find out why this town has the warmest welcome for Americans anywhere in France.
Sainte-Mère-Église was vital to the D-Day landings because of its location on the main thoroughfare from Cherbourg into Normandy. So it had to be taken in order for the landings to be successful.
In the very early hours of D-Day, U.S. paratroopers began landing in the market square in an operation that will become a legend. The paratroopers were falling into a death trap. German troops were out in force, and they picked off the defenseless Americans as they landed.
It turned into, an old American phrase, a turkey shoot. Around the square here, telegraph poles and trees were festooned with dead and dying Americans, literally shot before they could release themselves from their parachutes.
For paratrooper John Steele, it was going to be a night he would never forget. His parachute got tangled in the church tower, and he dangled helplessly above the carnage in the square.
Steele was looking down on a hell on earth. Imagine hanging there with all the guilt of seeing your friends shot down around you and being unable to do absolutely anything. Imagine hanging there for 2 hours, not knowing whether you're going to live and die. The chances are you're going to die.
To make matters worse, the church bells were tolling, and Steele was deafened as they rang just inches from his ears. Eventually, a German cut him down and took him prisoner. But a few hours later, the advancing American army captured Sainte-Mère-Église, and Steele was liberated. After the war, John Steele returned to Sainte-Mère-Église every year on the anniversary of D-Day. Hotels in the town were named after him, and in his honor, the townsfolk even placed a John Steele dummy on the church tower, which you can still see today. But here's a secret.
It seems that the dummy is actually hanging on the wrong side of the church. John Steele should actually be hanging on the east face of the church rather than where he currently resides. The only reason he's there is so that tourists can take their photographs unhindered by passing traffic and to possibly get the best view of the church. So it's actually in the wrong place.
At the town's Airborne Museum, you can find out more about the paratroopers who made themselves up as Native Americans to strike fear into the Germans.
It's only when you begin to see what ordinary Americans did in Normandy, in France, in June 1944, at Sainte-Mère-Église, at Omaha Beach, when you really understand what American patriotism actually means, what the American spirit actually means, what ordinary Americans can do.
D-Day was the day that changed the course of history. And in Normandy, it will never be forgotten. Coming up, the haunted bunker that saved the world.
This seat can be described during the summer of 1940 as the hottest seat in Britain.
And see the village they call the Pompeii of World War II. The village of Oradour-sur-Glane has been called the Pompeii of World War II, a place preserved exactly as it was on the day of its violent death. The ruins, near Limoges in central France, are a permanent reminder of one of the darkest and most terrible events of the Second World War. Today, the village is a monument to the events of June 10, 1944, a normal day disturbed by the arrival of a division of German soldiers who ordered all the inhabitants to report here in the market square. Guide Fabien Pica tells visitors the story of that appalling day.
Oradour was a very normal village, like everywhere in France. A lot of artisans, and it was very peaceful and pleasant to live here. No one in Oradour could suspect a massacre could take place.
The Germans who had come to Oradour were no ordinary soldiers, but members of the notorious SS Das Reich Division. Most were no more than teenagers, but all of them were battle-hardened from Hitler's war in Russia.
The SS were the elite of German society. Usually to join the SS, they looked for 3 generations back, so these people were genetically, racially pure.
In the market square, the 650 villagers were divided up. The men were taken to barns around the village, while the women and children were marched to the church, forced to sing as they went. There was no panic. The 400 women and children were packed into the tiny church. They had no idea what was about to happen.
And it's impossible to think about a massacre. The church is one place where we pray, but not where we massacre.
A group of SS soldiers dragged a box into the center of the church and lit a fuse. Moments later, it exploded, giving off suffocating fumes as machine guns started to fire.
This church today, it's possible to see everywhere the impacts of the bullets.
One woman survived by making an amazing escape bid. Marguerite Ruffanche had seen her daughters killed and dived for cover behind the altar. She managed to climb out of the smashed stained glass window above her, falling 10 feet to the ground outside. Wounded and terrified, she hid in the vegetable garden in the nearby vicarage. For the rest, there was only death. This mangled baby carriage hints at the horror and the heat of the fire in the church, which was so intense it even melted the bell in the tower.
Given the bloodbath Europe had experienced, it's difficult sometimes to pinpoint particular massacres that stand out, but it was the exceptionalism of Oradour that does mark it as being different.
The explosion in the church was a signal for the SS to open fire on the men of the village. In one barn, 5 men survived by lying beneath the dead.
As they were shot, the first ones, they fell on the ground, and then the other fell on them. So they were saved by their friends.
Wounded and in fear of their lives, they hid inside some nearby rabbit hutches. They could only watch from their hiding place in terror as the Nazis set fire to the village and prowled the streets, picking off survivors as they tried to flee. Another survivor was a boy who hid behind a tree to escape the blood-crazed soldiers. As the killing came to an end, many of the unburned bodies were thrown into the village well. The bodies have not been moved, and it is now a grave. Finally, the SS raided Oradour's wine cellars and drank its champagne. One soldier even stole a car.
All the survivors tell that after the nights after the massacre, they couldn't sleep inside. They had to sleep outside because inside they felt in danger.
The Das Reich Division marched north to fight the Americans, who had landed in France on D-Day 4 days before the massacre. Their leader at Oradour, Adolf Diekmann, was killed shortly afterwards by an American shell. The reason for Oradour's destruction remained a secret.
Though Oradour seems unusual on first glance, it actually fits into the pattern of behavior of the SS throughout Eastern Europe, where many thousands of people lost their lives and many hundreds of villages were similarly destroyed.
A new Oradour-sur-Glane was built half a mile from the ruins, and the old town became a national monument. Its cars, bicycles, beds, and sewing machines, a poignant reminder that people once lived very ordinary lives here and came to an extraordinary end.
When people come to Oradour today, they feel sad. They also find it difficult to believe that it happened, and the ruins are there to show and to prove to everybody that it had happened.
A newly opened high-tech exhibition center tells today's visitors the story of the villagers of Oradour and looks into the mindset and motivations of the young men who perpetrated the massacre. But the tragedy of Oradour is told best by the stones themselves, stark reminders of the evils of World War II. In the London suburb of Uxbridge, deep underground is a bunker that can truly claim to have changed the course of history. Hidden beneath the top security Royal Air Force Base, to visit it, you have to apply to Warrant Officer Chris Wren, who holds the key to its amazing secrets.
This is the underground operations room, which was responsible for the air defence of London and the southeast of England during the summer of 1940, a period we know in history as the Battle of Britain. And it was this room which was the saviour of the United Kingdom and that of the free world.
60 feet below ground and protected by a concrete shield, this is where Winston Churchill and Royal Air Force chieftains commanded the legendary Battle of Britain in total secrecy. And amazingly, it's been preserved exactly as it was at the time.
This seat can be described during the summer of 1940 as the hottest seat in Britain, because the man that sat here made the decisions which altered the course of the Second World War.
In 1940, Hitler, having conquered the rest of Europe, sent wave after wave of bombers across the English Channel to wreak havoc and knock Great Britain out of the war.
What Hitler wanted to achieve through the Battle of Britain was to knock out the British Air Force and infrastructure before he could invade the country. Every day, they would go up and fight to try to gain superiority and knock as much of the infrastructure of Britain out as possible.
At the bunker in Uxbridge, the RAF commander could only sit and wait until he got a signal from the coast that German bombers had been sighted. Then, he had to act fast to scramble British fighters.
So the controller sitting here had 4 minutes to make a decision: which squadrons he wanted airborne, what height, and where they were to intercept.
The controller was not working alone. As news came in of enemy aircraft approaching, their progress was charted on this huge map of southern England by women Air Force members, known as WAFs.
It must have been a very weird and surreal place to work. The inside of the room must have been electric.
As British fighters counterattacked, the WAFs pushed the wooden blocks representing them towards the German bomber formations.
Of course, the atmosphere would have been hugely tense, because every time they took away a wooden counter, that meant that somebody had crashed, burnt, and died.
The controller was also helped by a panel of lights above the map that showed the battle positions of Britain's fighter squadrons. The lights would flash as the enemy were sighted. They would flash again as they were ordered to attack. And finally, they would flash red, meaning the airplanes were in the thick of the action.
Winston Churchill wrote in his memoirs about being here on the 15th of September 1940 when all the bulbs glowed red, meaning all our squadrons were airborne and engaging the enemy. We had no more reserves left.
By September 1940, Hitler realized he could not destroy the Royal Air Force, and the Battle of Britain was over.
What's fair to say is that even if it was a draw was a victory for Britain, a draw was a defeat for Germany.
Churchill realised that what took place here would decide the fate of this country.
Here's an amazing secret. Churchill was so moved by what he saw in the bunker at Uxbridge that he made his most famous speech on the steps as he came out.
Never in the history of human conflict have the many owed so much to the few.
What he had said was so powerful, he decided to repeat it just days later in the Houses of Parliament, and it went down in history. The mood in the bunker was not always somber. The young WAFs worked hard, but they played hard as well. And they were always keen to come down into the bunker if one particular officer was on duty here.
In 1943, in this position, Rex Harrison, the movie actor, used to sit. He was the liaison officer between here and Bomber Command at High Wycombe. Popular with the ladies, he was known as Sexy Rexy. And of course, he went on to star in such films as Dr. Dolittle and My Fair Lady.
The bunker was one of the safest places to be in the world in 1940. Deep underground and totally unbeknown to the Germans. Even if the impossible happened, there was a way out.
This is the secret escape hatch. Although the operations room is 60 feet underground, bomb-proof and gas-proof, they had to have another method of leaving the building in case of emergencies.
Perhaps because it is such a safe place. It's not surprising that some people from the Battle of Britain era still don't seem to want to leave. Many visitors to the Uxbridge bunker report hearing ghostly voices and strange whispering.
We now have ghostly voices in the building, a man and a woman talking at distance. You can't hear what they're saying, but you could certainly determine that it is a conversation. It's been heard throughout the building, not just at this point, by many visitors, not only the staff. I've heard them on many occasions, and it's just a low murmur, but you can distinguish between the male and the female. It doesn't detract from the building, it's not malevolent, it's just something you come to accept.
Only one person has ever died in the Uxbridge bunker. In 1942, a sentry showing off with his gun fired it accidentally and killed a WAF. Could this be the explanation for the ghosts in the Battle of Britain bunker? Coming up, the secret first act of The Curse of the Kennedys. And what terrible secret was Hitler hiding beneath this enormous dome?
So what do you guys know about V2 rockets?
The Curse of the Kennedys began here, at Firstfield Airfield in eastern England, in one of the most secret and astonishing missions of World War II. To most people, the curse of America's first family began when President John F. Kennedy was assassinated as he drove through Dealey Plaza, Dallas on November 22, 1963. U.S. Air Force enthusiast Trevor Jeremy knows different. He has uncovered the story of the Kennedys' lost prince, JFK's older brother Joe, who was marked out to be president but was killed by his desperation to become a war hero.
Can you imagine the apprehension he must have had, knowing that what laid ahead and the amount of courage it must have taken to essentially strap yourself into what was a flying bomb?
Joe's younger brother JFK had become a war hero already, fighting in the Pacific, and Joe wanted a slice of the action. Operation Anvil was just what he had been waiting for. It was perhaps the most dangerous air mission of World War II.
I think there must have been a great deal of pressure on Joe Kennedy to perform for his family, for the reputation of his family. But also I think there was an expectation that he would do well in politics, that he was supposed to prove himself as a man. Certainly I assume that's why he wanted to become so involved in the war.
Having failed to bring London to its knees with V-1 flying bombs and V-2 rockets, the Nazis had started constructing the V-3, a massive gun on the French coast, hidden beneath a concrete shield. Joe's mission was to fly a Liberator bomber packed with 374 boxes of explosives into the V-3 gun site. He would parachute out at the very last moment, an amazingly dangerous feat of daring. Incredibly, the billet hut where Joe Kennedy spent his last night still stands. You can visit it, but you have to get the key from local farmer Fred Burrows, who uses it as a storage shed. It's still full of reminders of its famous former occupant.
All right, thanks very much, Mr. Burrows. Oh, wow, look at this. This is where Joseph Kennedy spent his last evening. Oh, look at that. That is excellent. That coat hanger there, it's just where Joe would have hung his coat, his jacket before going off to his briefing and to get his flying gear ready for his fateful mission. And Joe's bed would have been over here, in this section here. And then there would have been a partition across here, which we would have had for some privacy. Joseph Kennedy could have been President of the United States. It's not a very presidential place to have your last night, is it?
Joe left the billet hut on August the 12th, 1944, and cycled to the airfield, knowing the odds of survival were stacked against him. The airfield was used for the U.S. Air Force's most secret European operations. Even today, it's still not marked on official maps. Joe Kennedy's doomed mission took off from the airfield as planned, but just after takeoff, a spark from faulty equipment ignited the 10 tons of explosives on board, causing one of the biggest explosions of World War II. As a boy, Michael Muttett saw the incredible fireball as it crashed over New Delight Heath, 20 miles south of Firstfield Airfield.
And when it got over grandfather's house here at New Delight, the Liberator exploded in an enormous fireball. I got on the bike and with a brother dashed down here to see what had happened and found the whole of the heath ablaze.
Tiny particles of Kennedy's airplane were scattered across the heath.
I'm still finding wreckage even today. In fact, I have in my pocket pieces that I found only a few days ago. I mean, here we have a piece of a self-sealing fuel tank. We've got one or two pieces of venting and piping, and also a large piece showing 2 treads of its Goodyear main wheel tyre. To have a link with the Kennedy family in my hands in these pieces of wreckage, I feel an honour, but also slightly spooky, because this was the first chain in the Kennedy curse.
And there could be even more intriguing finds to come. Even Joe Kennedy's very own identification tags hidden amongst the grass and heather.
At the time of the crash, a small amount of human remains were found on this area. There's a good chance that the tags are still somewhere on this heath.
With Joe dead, the Kennedys' hope for a son who would become president passed to John, a dream that was realized in 1961.
But his father must have been, and he must have pinned all his hopes on Joe Jr. Certainly then transferred those hopes to John Kennedy, his next son.
I think that Joe would have made a pretty good president. He was forceful, he had a mind of his own, if he had an idea, he'd follow it through.
And here's a secret. During his presidency, JFK himself made an undercover pilgrimage to New Delight Heath to see for himself the spot where his brother died on the secret mission. It's a pilgrimage you too can make today. La Coupole in northern France is the Second World War's most amazing structure. The massive concrete dome hides the secrets of Hitler's most terrible weapon, the V-2 rocket. Today, a group of American students studying in France has come to La Coupole to explore its amazing network of tunnels and chambers and discover its secret link to the United States conquest of space.
So what do you guys know about V-2 rockets?
Pretty much nothing.
They were used in
World War II. Oh, shit. Okay.
Some of the incredible complex is now open to visitors, and director Yves Lemonnier has agreed to show them around. The tunnels were dug out to build and house masses of V-2 rockets. This was to be an underground factory of horror, mass-producing missiles to fire across the English Channel at Great Britain.
Hitler has imagined to destroy Buckingham Palace, Westminster Abbey. All the roots of the British people has to be destroyed. So let's go choose those panels.
The monstrous construction was built by thousands of Russian slave laborers, male and female. After it was built, they were of no further use to the Nazis.
To launch the V-2 from this site, they decided to stop the works. They put those guys in a train, and this train moved to Germany. And most of these men and women were killed in the days after their arrival at the concentration camp in Sachsenhausen near Berlin. So they have been completely wiped off history by the Nazis.
Twisting and turning beneath the dome are more than 5 miles of tunnels. All but a tiny segment are too dangerous to open to the public. Exclusively, we have been given special permission to go through the locked gates and explore what lies beyond.
Does it go really deep underground?
Yes.
You can almost feel this sort of the tension that was here. It's like it's still kind of in the air, just the way the walls are half finished. It seems really hurried, and I don't know. It's almost like it doesn't seem like it'd be that hard to really imagine what it would be like.
After years of trial and error, the V-2 rocket was designed and perfected by Nazi Germany's finest scientists to wipe out entire cities. The Nazis hoped that once La Coupole was finished, more than 60 V-2 rockets a day could be launched at London from here, and Britain would have no choice but to surrender.
A V-2 rocket, quite simply, was a very fast flying bomb. But of course it was more than that, because it marked the start of a new phase of warfare seen throughout the Cold War, where missile technology was key.
In the area that is open to the public, you can see the incredibly high room where the rockets would have been primed, ready to be launched.
Is there a way to actually, I mean, are we allowed to go up where that walkway is and sort of look down?
Yes, yes, and you can take this ladder if you want.
Are you serious?
Wow.
I can tell you though, everybody should try to climb these ladders. They're really cool.
The walls are unfinished. It's just cut into.
But this platform is really pretty much finished. People could stand up here and work up here, and if this thing wasn't here, they could launch rockets pretty easily.
It's really steep. I'm really not sure how they managed to carve away the walls without, you know, being in considerable danger. Oh, it's pretty intense. I almost finished this place.
The Allies got wind of what the Nazis were doing here and bombed it intensively. The whole area was left looking like a spooky moonscape, but the 55,000-ton concrete and steel dome did its job well, protecting the underground base from the aerial bombardment. Incredibly, unexploded bombs are still being discovered around the dome.
We are still finding some bombs all around the site, 60 years after the British and American bombings. Some of the bombs are very deep in the clay, and we've just found one last week, 30 feet from our entrance building.
What kind of a bomb?
An American one.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Oh, well, it's a good thing our bombs last so long.
Yes, yes.
The Nazis' bomb-proof dome survived, but the V-2 rocket program was at an end. As Allied troops swept through France in 1944, the Nazis panicked, and La Coupole, just 3 months from being completed, was abandoned. Inside the dome itself, there's an exhibition telling the story of the V-2. The exhibition also explains how the creator of the V-2, Wernher von Braun, went on to America after the war and played a key role developing the space program.
Here you also see that a couple great things happened that maybe had their roots in something that was not so great.
The scope of everything here is unbelievable unless you experience it yourself. It's reality, it happened.
After the war, the tunnels were dynamited. But slowly, they're being cleared so that everyone who comes here can see for themselves this gigantic Nazi ruin. Up next, the Castle of Evil. We see the temple that marked the center of the Nazi world.
It is very, very strange.
At Castle Wewelsburg in northern Germany, the Nazis built a temple of evil. Musician Lee Saunders' work is inspired by World War II, and he has come to uncover the castle's strange wartime history.
I've heard many stories of this place. A lot of it is sort of myths and legends, and today I've come here to look around, to feel it, to see it, to talk to people, and try as much as possible to get into some of the secrets that it holds.
The medieval castle was rebuilt by Heinrich Himmler, Adolf Hitler's right-hand man, and leader of the SS, the Nazis' most feared and fanatical troops. Himmler was fascinated by an ancient prophecy that Wewelsburg would be the scene of a titanic battle between Germany and an army from the east.
Castle Wewelsburg was, for Himmler, a recreation of the medieval ideals of the past that were so important to Germany at the time. It was creating a myth for people to believe in of a shared Germanic past.
In 1934, Himmler took over the castle and set about turning it into a shrine, a monument to the evils of the Nazis. 2 bizarre chambers remain from Himmler's incredible scheme, and Lee has agreed to meet Kirsten John Stuck, curator of the castle, to see them for himself. First, the room the Nazis called the Hall of the Supreme Leaders.
It's very impressive. Just getting the feel, I can't get over the sound. I really can't. I mean, even if I try and whisper, it's loud, isn't it?
All records of Himmler's plans for the castle were destroyed at the end of the war. But it's believed this room was to be used by the 12 top SS leaders, who would sit here at a round table in a grotesque imitation of the legend of King Arthur. At the center is a symbol of pure evil, a black sun surrounded by a jagged design modeled on a pagan carving from Germany's dark pre-Christian past. The SS were so obsessed by this design that even the castle's crockery bore the evil inscription.
I'm in the center of the room, I'm in the center of the complex, but this was going to be the center of the Nazi world. I mean, to me, that's powerful. That feels incredible. What about yourself?
Of course, I think of the dark side.
But Wewelsburg Castle was not just a place where the Nazis would celebrate their living leaders. It was also a place where they would venerate the dead. Beneath the Hall of the Supreme Leaders is a chamber that is even stranger still.
So this is the crypt. Wow. This is more impressive than the other room. It is, isn't it?
The crypt was built to resemble a 3,000-year-old tomb, with a sacred flame burning in the middle. Kirsten believes it was intended to house the ashes of dead Nazi leaders. It was designed to create sensations of awe and fear in those who entered.
Stand in the center. And
It is only in this, at this point.
my God,
Well,
that is terrible. I'm going to step out because that is very strange. I wasn't prepared for this. It's an incredible sound. You're getting the reverb and the echo. It's bouncing off the walls, and it's nothing straight, so it's coming back. But when you stand in here, it sounds like a TV studio has just got hold of your voice and synthesized it. It's lowered it, it's made it fatter, and it is very, very strange.
The crypt was built by slave laborers from Germany's smallest concentration camp, built specially to provide workers for the castle. Work in the crypt was particularly hard, as men were forced to break down 14 feet of solid rock to make Himmler's twisted dream a reality. More than 1,200 men died working on Wewelsburg Castle, and they are commemorated with a monument put up on the site of the concentration camp. Himmler planned to expand the triangular castle to gargantuan proportions and crown it with an astrological observatory.
Himmler wanted a planetarium to be built at the top of the castle so that he could study the cosmos and work out the future of the Nazis through that, and maybe even where to put his battle lines.
But when American soldiers arrived at the castle in 1945, they found it deserted. In the crypt, they found hundreds of rings inscribed with skulls and pagan symbols. They were taken back to America by ordinary GIs as grisly souvenirs of their visit. Replicas can still be seen at the castle. Lee found his visit to Wewelsburg a powerful experience.
It's a human evil rather than a mystical devil evil. It's men at their best and it's men at their worst. The architecture, the design is beautiful, but we know the slave labour built it, and we know what it was going to be used for, so that makes it disturbing.
Today, German school children are taken to see the Nazi remains at Wewelsburg Castle, so they can learn about their nation's terrible past and resolve that it should never happen again. On a moonlit night in 1941, Adolf Hitler's deputy, Rudolf Hess, flew an amazing solo peace mission to Scotland. His mission was so secret that even today, papers relating to it are still being held from the public. Could this be because they implicate powerful members of the British aristocracy in a plot to make peace with the Nazis?
Clearly, there were members of the British aristocracy who were in favour of coming to some kind of agreement and ending the war.
Navigating alone, Hess flew to Scotland from Augsburg in Germany, armed with a peace plan he intended to present to the Duke of Hamilton, Scotland's highest lord. Using only a map on his lap, he got lost in the dark, ran out of fuel, and had to parachute out of his plane moments before it crashed. he landed in a field at Floor's Farm near Glasgow. As he struggled to get out of his parachute, he was captured by a farmhand. He was taken to this cottage, where he sat in the simple kitchen, in this seat, to await the arrival of the authorities. The story he told them sent shockwaves around the world.
His idea was that if he could talk the British into becoming allies with Germany against the Russians, that he would be listened to and that there would be some sort of deal struck.
Sensationally, he claimed he was on a peace mission to Britain's aristocracy and had a prior arrangement to land his plane on the private airstrip at Dungavel House, the home of the Duke of Hamilton. The Duke denied Hess's claim, and the Deputy Führer was arrested and thrown in prison.
The trouble is, Hess, as many Nazis beforehand, overestimated the power of the aristocracy. Effectively, these people, whether they wanted peace with Germany or not, no longer held power.
Rudolf Hess expert Stephen Pryor is fascinated by the facts behind the story of the amazing mission. He has even written a book about it.
Rudolf Hess is a far more important figure in history than people realize.
And if you stay at Templar Lodge, his hotel near Edinburgh, he will give you a guided tour of Scotland's Hess-related sites.
You need to go to the places, experience it for yourself, and come to your own conclusion.
One of Stephen's most prized possessions is Hess's Iron Cross, won for valor in World War I.
Hess's motives for landing in Scotland are still somewhat controversial. Many people believe that he himself was delusional, and of course the Duke of Hamilton's family would deny that there was ever any chance of him getting any support from that quarter.
Visitors to Lennox Love Castle can see the Rudolf Hess Museum, put together by the present Duke of Hamilton. The Duke has agreed to give us an exclusive guided tour.
Well, this is Hess's map. The intriguing thing is the annotations on it, which are all Hess's. The flight itself was carried out with a great deal of skill and, I think I may say, daring as well.
In the museum, you can see the compass Hess wore on his knee as he flew over Scotland.
This little compass here was also one of the things he carried. It was a compass that goes around your knee, and I have to actually say that it's pretty jerry-built, if you could excuse the expression. It's not well made at all.
You can also see a tiny fragment of Hess's plane given to the Duke by his father.
What its function was, I simply can't tell you. I was, of course, extremely disappointed to have something like this because I'd been expecting a great big tail fin with a nice swastika on it.
Hitler denied all knowledge of Hess's peace mission and announced his deputy had gone insane. After the war, Hess was sentenced to life imprisonment and died in jail in 1987. But conspiracy theories continue to flourish.
British aristocracy were fascinated with the successes of National Socialism. So this is not the flight of a madman. This is something that's been very well set up between both sides and very well planned. And the members of the British aristocracy were involved, but so were members of the British government.
I have never believed in any of the conspiracy theories, although I've read all of them, and some of them are quite ingenious. Some of them are absolutely pathetic.
There's certainly very little evidence that there was a powerful peace party in Britain that could have affected the kind of changes that were necessary for a compromise at that time.
Yet intriguingly, more than 60 years after Hess's incredible flight, the British government still refuses to release all their files on the affair.
The war could have finished in 1941. Millions of lives would have been saved. The history of the world, the history of the United States, the history of the economic development of Europe would be completely different were it not for that one error of navigation.
If one thing is certain in the story of Hitler's deputy Rudolf Hess, it is that the controversy will never die away. Coming up, the genius who broke the Enigma code. And where is the secret location of his buried treasure?
When he came after the war to try and find them, of course, the map was absolutely no use to him whatsoever.
Bletchley Park, 50 miles north of London, was the most secret place in Britain during World War II. It was here that the country's top brains worked at fever pitch to break the Nazi Enigma code and help win the war in an atmosphere of paranoia and total secrecy. Today, Bletchley Park is open to the public, and its secrets are being slowly unraveled thanks to volunteers like Merlin Hackon.
We're in Bletchley Park, the most secret place in Great Britain. 60 years ago, this road would have looked entirely different. There would have been people streaming in. Most of them would have been going down to the huts, which are on my left here. It was there that they broke the Enigma codes and won the Second World War.
The Enigma machine was used by the German military to send messages to each other all over the world.
The Germans would send a whole array of different types of messages through the Enigma machine, from the very, very simple all the way through to very complicated commands for ship movements and attacks to be launched.
Using a system of rotors, the Enigma coded German messages by substituting one letter for another in vast numbers of combinations.
The Germans were absolutely convinced that Enigma was completely unbreakable, and in a way, the British were able to use that complete belief to their great advantage, really.
In the huts at Bletchley, thousands of men and women worked away at deciphering the codes, all of them sworn to such a level of secrecy that they were not even allowed to talk to each other about what they were doing.
But I think everybody there was also made to understand that you didn't ask questions. You had no business knowing what everybody else did. They were certainly very aware that if the Enigma secret ever got out, it would mean the end of their whole operation. Once the Germans knew that Enigma was being broken, that was it. You know, the game was over.
And the stakes were sky high. In Britain's darkest hour, the country's very survival relied on cracking the Enigma code. So ships carrying vital supplies from America could avoid the wolf packs of German U-boats that prowled the Atlantic.
Cracking the Enigma code was hugely important, both in terms of limiting the loss of tonnage of shipping and, of course, lives.
But the biggest breakthrough at Bletchley was down to one crazy genius, Alan Turing, one of World War II's most amazing characters.
He was a very complicated and slightly paranoid man, and obviously quite difficult to work with, as geniuses tend to be, because they make those kinds of leaps of logic that most of us find rather difficult to follow.
At Bletchley Park, you can see a model of the Bomba, the machine Turing invented to massively cut the time it took to decode Enigma messages. It was the first step on the road to the modern computer. This model was a prop used in the Kate Winslet film Enigma. Turing's workplace, Hut 8, is not currently open to the public, but we have been given an exclusive peek inside.
Alan Turing worked from this desk. He looked out from this window while he was deciding on his problems. He was a very brilliant mathematician. He worked at Cambridge prior to the war, was recruited to come here to break these Enigma codes. He realised quite quickly that he could break the Enigma code mathematically, which he did at this very desk. And he then went on to devise a machine called a Bomba, which broke it much faster, in fact, within 2 or 3 hours. He was very eccentric, however, and for example, on one occasion, people here in this hut threw his mug in the lake across there. Having done that, he purchased a second mug, chained it to this very radiator, and would never unchain it. He would make the tea and the coffee or whatever he was drinking from there bending down.
It was Turing's bizarre behavior that led to one of the strangest ever incidents at Bletchley Park and its most amazing undiscovered secret. Terrified that Germany was about to invade Britain, Turing changed his life savings into bars of silver and wrapped them in paper. Wearing the gas mask he always wore outdoors, he pushed them in a baby carriage to a remote spot near Bletchley Park, where he buried them to collect after the war.
So much happened to Bletchley Park over the time period. You know, so many of the huts were built, so much was levelled, that when he came after the war to try and find them, of course, the map was absolutely no use to him whatsoever. The whole place was completely different, and he couldn't find them. I mean, it's just sums cheering up.
The silver bars are still waiting to be discovered, somewhere near Bletchley Park. In the exhibition at Bletchley, you can see actual World War II Enigma machines and the rotors that work them. Tourists come to marvel at them and at the ingenuity of the men and women who cracked their codes.
We learned a lot. We learned a lot in the last 2.5 hours. It was very, very interesting. And I would like to come back and get into some of the other exhibits.
Bletchley Park is not just home to the Enigma, it also boasts the largest exhibition of Winston Churchill memorabilia anywhere in the world. It's the personal collection of Winston Churchill fanatic Jack Darragh.
Anything related to Churchill that is of a good standard, I tried to acquire.
From boyhood, he has collected more than 1,000 Winston Churchill-themed items, from Toby jugs and figurines to the bell of the Havengore, the barge that carried the wartime leader's body up the River Thames in London at his state funeral. A must-see for anyone interested in Winston Churchill and Britain's wartime bulldog spirit. Victory over the Nazis brought peace to the planet, but left scars that can still be seen today. Visiting the sites of World War II is a powerful, moving, and unforgettable experience.